Story 1. My parents send entitled sibling over when they find out I'm not visiting for Christmas. I, 19 male, have been living in Europe since I turned 18. I went directly into work from high school and have been almost entirely self-sufficient since I moved. One of the biggest factors for this decision was my parents' issues with my identity as a bisexual man. They never disown me outright, but they consistently tell me ways I can change back, and refer to the me from before I came out as an entirely different person. They have even referred to the me from before as their actual child. It has led to many, many fights. The first year I lived abroad, I ended up going back to the US for the holidays, and it was rough for a myriad of reasons. The following Christmas, I decided not to go through the same thing and informed my parents I wouldn't be visiting the US. I used the excuse of not having enough vacation days, and they left it alone. My aunt, who was supportive enough and the reason I could even move to Europe, suggested I should spend the season visiting my sibling, Sam, 23NB, in Canada, since she knew I was much closer to them than my parents. For context, everyone else in my family is pretty intolerant. My older brother has begun to break out of their bubble and has been reaching out to learn more about LGBTQ topics, but he is still stuck on some of our parents' ideas. Sam moved out years before I did, moving to Canada when they were 18 for college and never moving back, and never fully came out to our parents. My coming out was a rough affair that stretched out for years, as I had to fight for my parents to believe me. They still don't. Sam decided they didn't want the drama of all that, and we bonded on our shared queerness and ostracization. After figuring out that I had enough funds to even do the trip, I was beyond ecstatic. It had been years since I'd seen Sam, as they had been slowly cutting off the family, and spending Christmas with someone I cared about and who cared about me sounded amazing. We messaged almost every day discussing ideas, costs, timings, and logistics, and eventually settled on a pretty relaxed trip with money set aside for a few big dinners. At some point, I had the usual forced phone call with my parents where they tried to show they had interest in my life. I was so excited about the trip, I ended up telling them all about it. They were a little shocked, but they seemed to let it go pretty easily, and I moved on to small talk about my job. Unfortunately, the next day they started spamming me about covering my flights to see them that Christmas. I was understandably confused and clarified that I was visiting Sam that Christmas. They explained that it would be so much cheaper if they covered my tickets to see them, and then I bought tickets to visit Sam from there instead of from the EU, which would have cut my visit to Canada from 2 weeks to 3 days. I refused and said that I had already purchased the tickets, and they relented. At least I thought they did. 3 weeks before my flight to Canada, I found out from Sam that our parents had bought last-minute tickets for our youngest brother, Mike, 17M, to come up for a significant portion of my trip. Both me and Sam were shocked and reasonably suspicious about this development, and we reached out for more details and were told that it was actually Mike who planned all this. It was definitely not. He didn't even know how long he was going for. We informed them that we had planned for a very chill stay in Christmas and would be paying for everything ourselves. Our parents affirmed that it would be fine because Mike had his allowance, about $100 a month. Me and Sam were floored. They were sending their youngest child to a foreign country with only $100 on very short notice. It was already $30 for an Uber to the house, and since Sam didn't have a car, that would be how Mike would be getting to and from the airport. That's already half his allowance, and we were planning to do much more travel along with expensive meals. I raised my concerns and our parents waved us off, saying he could always dip into his savings, about $850, which was given to us by our grandparents when we were born, and they added to every birthday. It became clearer and clearer that they were more so sending Mike in an attempt to have some kind of control over our Christmas than for him to actually enjoy his trip. Though they didn't let up on trying to guilt-trip us on how sad Mike had been that he couldn't spend Christmas with us. It also became clear that they were not comfortable having the two of us spend an entire vacation together, as they didn't want us to create an echo chamber to shit-talk them. They often referred to our conversations as echo chambers if it was about anything they didn't agree with or want us talking about. Thankfully, we had 4 days to ourselves before Mike arrived, which included Christmas Day, thanks to them buying their tickets so last minute, which was a blessing. When our brother finally did arrive, we did our best to keep everything fun and civil. We invited him to play group games and video games, figured out how we could include him in playing Minecraft since he didn't bring a computer, but he refused every time as he wanted to continue playing his phone game that he had gotten very into. Fair enough, I get really into games sometimes too, but I was getting increasingly agitated that he would go complaining to our parents about us not including him. Sam assured me that even if he did, it wouldn't be our problem, and we moved on. We got him to go out with us one day and offered to go to a train museum. He loves anything vehicles, which he was pretty excited about, and we covered the Uber and his entrance fees. Mike disappeared in the museum though, and we ended up having to keep tracking him down while we went through the museum. After that, we went to one of those food hubs with tons of restaurants to choose from. It was a little stressful for me as someone with a food allergy, but I managed, and we agreed on a table to meet up at. We were chatting through dinner when Mike poked fun at me for not being a real adult, and I snapped that at least I covered the entire trip myself. He asked me if that was really true, and I confirmed that I paid for everything, from the flights to the meals, and then I had to restrain myself when he scoffed. The conversation moved on, and I asked Sam about our plans for New Year's Eve. Mike was leaving early New Year's Eve, so we had the night to ourselves, and we started discussing party plans. Mike brought up how he did not like parties, and I made a joke about how I found them hard sometimes and that social anxiety could be a bitch, not knowing what to say to people and all that. Mike proceeded to say, yeah, I mean, people are such assholes for not talking to me at parties. And me and Sam had to figure out how to casually move on from that. The night before Mike left for his flight at 7 a.m., he had to get up at 5 a.m. I got distracted playing Minecraft, and before I knew it, it was almost midnight. I closed out of the game and turned to see Mike on his phone watching videos. I caught his attention and told him he should probably head to bed soon and that I was sorry if I had kept him up. I did my business, got in bed and tried my best to sleep, but after 45 minutes of fighting allergies. Sam has the most perfect, beautiful, amazing cat. I finally got up to take some meds. When I went out of the room, I found the living room lights still on and Mike still awake and playing on his phone. I told him again, with a little irritation, he should probably go to bed soon as it was past midnight and he needed to be up early. He just looked at me before going back to his phone. I took my meds and went to bed, pissed and knowing full well I'd be blamed for keeping him up in the morning. I originally had no plans of waking up to see him off, but I'm a light sleeper and the sounds of Sam moving around woke me up. I laid in bed trying to decide if it was worth getting up to say goodbye or not when out of the silence I heard Mike say, "You know, it's my fault that I'm so tired." To which Sam went, okay. And suddenly I had the energy to get up. I told Mike that when I went to bed and he was still up on his phone, and when I came out almost an hour later for allergy meds he was still on his phone. In no way was his addiction to his screen my fault. I gave him a curt goodbye and went back to bed. Hours later we learned Mike's flight had been delayed. We went about our day and started getting ready for a small New Year's Eve party hosted by one of Sam's friends. It was evening when we found out Mike's flight was cancelled, and there were discussions on what to do. Mike offered to stay in a hotel, and I told Sam to not offer to have him back over as he wouldn't be able to attend the New Year's party, and I could not stand another hour with him. They offered anyway, but Mike chose to stay in the hotel. He ended up staying in the hotel overnight while me and Sam had an amazing New Year. Weeks later our parents started berating us over the fact we abandoned Mike alone in a hotel on New Year's Eve and were so rude and inconsiderate to him the entire trip. They told us off for not including him properly, not checking in on him during New Year's, and not making sure his trip was an absolute blast. Now it's August of the following year and they still bring it up as a gotcha whenever they can. Needless to say, we will not be letting them know the next time we visit each other.
Story 2. Today I effed up by thinking I could power through norovirus and instead became a human slip and slide. This is about the time norovirus tried to wipe out our entire household in under an hour. It started with our daughter getting sick first. She was so tiny and dehydrated we had to rush her to the ER for fluids. While we're sitting there watching her slowly come back to life within 4, my husband and I kept glancing at each other with that quiet, unspoken panic like, "Do you feel okay?" Which of course was immediately followed by both of us trying to gaslight ourselves into believing it was just sympathy nausea. Totally fine. We're fine. This is fine. But then, in what I now recognize as the dumbest moment of overconfidence in our marriage, we decided to ask the ER doctor if they could maybe give us a little something too, just, in case we started feeling bad. I said it as casually as possible, like I was asking for ketchup packets. The doctor laughed. Like actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle but a full haha no, like we'd asked for shots of Fireball to go. So we took our daughter and left, still trying to pretend we weren't both already starting to descend into gastrointestinal hell. We got to the car, and while I buckled our little biohazard angel into her car seat, my husband got into the driver's seat, gripped the wheel, and just froze. I asked him if he was okay, and he muttered something like, yeah, I'm fine, with the wide-eyed expression of a man who was absolutely not fine. Then, without warning, he leaned out of the open door and violently erupted onto the ER parking lot pavement. Like full-body heaving, soul leaving the body levels of vomit. It wasn't cute. It wasn't discreet. It was The Exorcist, except in front of God, security cameras, and probably a couple of nurses on their smoke break. When it was over, he wiped his mouth, stared straight ahead with dead eyes, and said with the grave seriousness of a man who's accepted his fate, "We're going home." So now he's driving us the 3 minutes home like a war veteran returning from the front lines, windows down, hands gripping the wheel, the car thick with tension and the faint smell of Gatorade and regret, while I sat there next to him clutching the diaper bag and silently praying my own stomach wouldn't betray me before we made it back. We got home. I threw our tiny agent of chaos into her crib like a football and heard my husband immediately disappear into the downstairs bathroom, where he started making noises so horrific I'm convinced they permanently damaged our pipes. Meanwhile, upstairs I started to feel the telltale rumblings in my stomach, and in my infinite wisdom, I thought a hot shower might fix it because water cures everything, right? Spoiler, it absolutely did not. I quickly became a human slip and slide of regret, slipping between the toilet and shower in a loop of agony, crying, sweating, and praying for the sweet release of death while my body attempted to evacuate itself from every available orifice. At some point, my husband, the pale, sweaty, and barely upright shell of a man he was, crawled upstairs like a zombie from The Walking Dead and peeked into the bathroom to check on me. I tried to say, "I'm okay," but instead my body betrayed me completely and I unleashed a cinematic wave of projectile vomit in the shower like I was auditioning for The Exorcist reboot. In that moment I knew we were both done for. In a last act of desperation, I grabbed my phone with trembling, vomit-streaked hands and posted in my neighborhood Facebook group asking if anyone at all, had nausea meds they could spare before this house officially became a CDC case study. Bless one angel of a neighbor who replied immediately with, "I have some Zofran, I'll hang it on the doorknob for you." So I somehow dragged myself to her house like a feral raccoon, puked in her yard. "I'm so sorry if you find this, I couldn't exactly leave a note," grabbed the meds and drove back home. I threw a pack at my husband like I was passing him a live grenade in an action movie, took one for myself and then collapsed naked and wet in the shower like a sad, forgotten rotisserie chicken. The moral of the story? If your kid ever gets norovirus, don't even try to be strong. Just burn your house down, fake your death, and start over.
Story 3. Am I the a-hole for not waking up a tourist who overslept and missed the day trip she paid for? Hi guys. I'm 21, female, a Bulgarian tour guide who accompanies groups to Sicily. On a recent trip, one woman who was traveling alone, mid-30s, was consistently oversleeping. The first day after we arrived, we had a day trip to Etna and Taormina, for which we departed at 8 a.m., as we do all other day tours. I make sure that all tourists are informed of the departure times on the bus the day before, and they also have my number to call in case they forget so I can remind them. They also all have printed out pamphlets with the schedule made by the travel agency that I hand out that has the time for departure on it. All of the group was on time. Except one woman. She was late by 10 minutes, which, okay, maybe she got caught up in something and was late. I excused it, then mentioned to the whole bus in the mic that I do not tolerate lateness beyond 15 minutes at most in case of emergency like a forgotten possession, and that I must always be called and informed in case someone is running late. Trip went by okay otherwise. The next day this same tourist was late again, by 25 minutes. Almost an entire half hour. I called her twice to no answer and we were just about to leave without her when she came out running and got on the bus. She got lucky, as the receptionist of the hotel asked me about a missing piece of info on the rooming list and earned her some time. I reminded everyone again that I will not be waiting anymore for late tourists in the morning, and waking up on time is their responsibility. When we came back that evening, she asked me if I could make sure to wake her up on time. I reminded her a third time that I'm not responsible for waking people up. Everyone gets a printed itinerary with departure times, and I announce everything the day before. She kept saying, No, just knock on my door if I'm not out by 8:15, and I kept repeating, I really can't do that for everyone, please set an alarm. Well, on the day we were visiting Syracuse, she didn't show up. I waited 15 minutes after the supposed departure time, called her twice to no response, then left with the bus and the rest of the group. She called me in a panic about an hour later asking where we were. I explained the situation calmly. She got angry and said that I had one job and that I cheated her out of the money she paid to go on that day trip. She missed the whole day trip and was furious the next day. Later she told the rest of the group that I abandoned her and also called my agency, leaving a bad review about me. Am I the a-hole for not personally waking up a grown woman despite warning her multiple times I wouldn't?
Story 4. Neighbor was stealing water from my supply, so I ruined him. Live in Asia, and just purchased a new house. Now, the previous owners were family friends who needed cash urgently and haven't been living in my country for nearly 3 years. So I got it for a great price in the middle of the capital city. The sale was finalized at the start of this month and I moved in right after. The house was definitely a fixer-upper, as the previous owners had left mid-renovation and the main door was locked with just a padlock, not even a door lock. The house had no gate, meaning anyone could just walk right on in. The first day I moved in, someone's bike was parked in the garage. I just parked it on the road on the same day I had a gate installed. An angry man was knocking on my gate later and I didn't bother answering, but through my window I could see him giving up and taking the bike after 15 minutes. So already I wasn't digging the neighborhood. But I didn't have any incidents after that, aside from people not knowing that this was no longer an abandoned house. So my gate was blocked more often than never, but a no parking sign on my gate fixed that issue. Last week, I was having a shower in my bathroom and I noticed my water pressure was lower than usual. I also heard my next-door neighbor's water pump going. Now this neighbor, an old guy, lived in a 3-storied house, the first being the lowest and the one he lived in. The other 2 floors were rented out to tenants. This guy wasn't happy about the house being sold and voiced many concerns to my friends, the previous owners. He was super angry about it, and my friends did warn me, but I'm a 6-foot guy with 3 dogs. No way he was doing anything, and yep, he didn't. So with this living situation, a water pump is needed to pump water to the tanks on the roof, since the public supplies pressure is not enough to get it up 3 stories. Now, I heard the water pump going and immediately was suspicious. Sure, coincidences exist, but it wouldn't hurt to check it out. I waited till his pump turned off and then turned on different taps in the house. Sure enough, the pressure was back to normal. This made me even more suspicious, but if he was stealing water, it also made sense. The water bills had been going up over the years this house wasn't lived in, but the house also had some water leaks. So it was chalked up to that, even if the bills were too high to be caused just by leaks. Now it's starting to make sense. At some point in the last 3 years, this old miser thought he'd save the cost of paying for water and waltzed into the property and is siphoning water from my lines. I couldn't find where exactly he was siphoning water from, but after checking my pressure multiple times, I was pretty sure. So I sat on it for a few days, thinking if I should confront him, go the legal path, or just let it be. Now, water in my country is very cheap. My total bill, even with washing 3 animals, a car every week, and watering my garden only cost like $5 per month, even with the neighbor also stealing some of it. But it wasn't about how much I was paying or who was paying for it. It's about entitled old people who think that they're deserving of using other people's resources without paying for it, and then getting away with it. It didn't sit right with me, and I really wanted to teach him a lesson. What I did was really simple. I just turned off my water from the mains. I wouldn't have to break into his property, nor would I be breaking any laws. It was the best way of getting back at him without needing to even lift a muscle. So on Monday, just 4 days ago, I waited till the pump flicked on and turned off the supply. Now, the way household tanks work in my country is that there's a ball valve in the tank which detects the level of water and turns on the pump. If the level doesn't increase, the valve stays open, which electronically sends a signal to the pump to stay on until the level gets to a point at which the valve closes and also shuts off the pump. However, the level wasn't increasing, and anyone knows that starving a pump of water isn't a good idea. This way, my expectation was that I'd burn out his pump and cause issues with his tenants. What I didn't account for is that his pump running constantly would mess up the fuses by constantly drawing power overnight and absolutely destroy his wiring. If he decided to upgrade his household wiring to a more modern standard, this would have been prevented. This house clearly still had 90s-era wiring. At around 3 a.m., I heard all residents in the house waking up and talking in hushed voices about why just their house in the neighborhood doesn't have power or water. I found out about the power part because the tenants devolved into shouting at their landlord. Our tenant protection laws are very important, and power and water are classed as essential even on a state level. Cutting those services are grounds for lawsuits, unless due to weather or some other unavoidable reason. In this case, the landlord is responsible for keeping the house wiring up to date and in good condition, alongside the supply of water. So the tenants were not happy, and one of them immediately moved out 2 days later when it was informed that water and power will not be returning the very same day this happened. Both tenants in the 2 floors lodged a complaint with the police, and if a person is in clear breach of laws, the police have the authority to fine or penalize the person without a court judgment. It can be challenged in court if the person thinks that they were unfairly penalized, but they still have to pay the fines and will only be refunded if and when the court finds the fines unlawful. So now, the landlord lost both tenants and has to pay a fine of $500, which is a lot of money in our country. He also has to refund the security deposits of both tenants and cannot rent out until both issues are fixed, which will cost him more money. As of right now, he's moving out on Sunday to his daughter's place since he cannot afford to live alone. The tenants were his only source of income, and he's a retired mechanic, so he has no other income. He did find out why the motor kept drawing power, overloaded the wiring, and burned out. He came by to my gate and asked me if I turned off my water, and I said, "Oh yeah, my tank had a new leak on a pipe and I turned it off till the next day until the plumber came by to fix the issue." Y'all, the look on his face. He kept a straight one, but I just knew he was holding back. He just said, "Oh okay," and went back inside. Not sure if he knows I know, but I don't care because he can't do anything. I'm getting a plumber down next week to correct my plumbing and remove any pipes that leave my property. So I got rid of my water issue and a neighbor who could potentially be a pain in the ass by simply flicking a tap off. 2 birds, 1 stone, I'd say.